All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're looking at an ancient festival that, on the surface, seems pretty straightforward, but it actually holds this incredible, multi-layered story. It's a story about a temple, a ritual that was forgotten, and a really surprising prophecy that completely redefines what a temple can even be. So, to get started, let's just put one single, kind of startling number on the table: 900 years. That's a long time for anything to be lost, right? Especially something that was supposed to be a yearly reminder. And that really gets us to the heart of the mystery here. A key part of the biblical Feast of Tabernacles was just, well, forgotten. For almost a whole millennium, a core instruction was just totally overlooked. So we're going to find out why and what its rediscovery tells us about a much, much bigger plan. Okay, so to understand what was lost, we have to go back, way back, to one of the biggest, grandest celebrations in the history of ancient Israel. This moment, believe it or not, sets the stage for the whole mystery. I want you to just picture this scene. King Solomon has just finished building his incredible temple. All of Israel is there. We're told that 120 priests blew their trumpets in perfect unison, and at that very moment, the visible glory of God, like a physical presence, filled the entire building. The celebration went on for 2 full weeks. It was an absolute peak moment for the nation. But here's the thing. For all of that grandeur, they completely overlooked a core part of the festival. The people were supposed to build and live in these little temporary shelters or booths to remember their ancestors' time in the wilderness. And unbelievably, historical records show this was ignored from the time of Joshua all the way to Ezra. That's over 900 years later. So let's jump forward those 9 centuries and see how a rediscovery changes everything. We're going to put 2 very different moments in history side by side, each centered on a very different kind of temple. On one hand, you've got Solomon's era, a powerful, wealthy, unified kingdom celebrating this glorious physical temple. The focus was totally external, on the building, on the visible presence of God. Then, 900 years later, you have Ezra's time, and it's a completely different picture. It's this small, humbled group of exiles coming back to Jerusalem. They have very few resources, and their focus isn't on some magnificent building, it's on rebuilding their community around God's written law, which they just rediscovered. And this is the crucial point, this huge shift in focus. In Ezra's day, they don't just gather to dedicate a structure, they gather to hear the word of God read out loud. The attention moves from a glorious place to personal understanding and obedience. And, you guessed it, it's right there in reading the law that they find the forgotten instruction to build the booths. Now, with this new focus on the law, some of the ceremonies that they've been doing for centuries suddenly took on this profound new meaning. They weren't just rituals anymore. They were prophetic clues, signposts pointing to something much deeper. Let's take the water pouring ceremony. For 7 straight days during the feast, a priest would pour water out at the altar. Now, on the surface, this was a pretty practical prayer for rain. Super important for their crops. But prophetically, it was a symbol for something way bigger, the Spirit of God being poured out like water on all people. And this is where it all connects, because Jesus made this brilliant connection. On the 8th and final day of the feast, the very day this water ceremony stopped, Jesus stands up in the temple and declares that he is the source of that prophetic living water. He's basically saying, that ritual you've been doing, I'm what it's all about. There were a couple of other key ceremonies that were also these prophetic clues. You had the illumination of the temple, where these huge lamps would light up the courtyards, symbolizing God's glory. And then you had the people waving palm branches, which was a celebration that pointed to a future, final victory over all nations. And just like he did with the water, Jesus directly connected himself to this illumination ceremony. Right there, in the middle of this festival of lights, he declares, I am the light of the world. See the pattern? He wasn't just taking part in the festival. He was claiming to be its ultimate meaning. So, this brings us to a huge turning point in the story. It's a prophecy from the time of that second, more humble temple. A prophecy that would have sounded absolutely impossible back then, but it held the key to this whole puzzle. So the prophet Haggai comes out with this just startling message. Now, you gotta remember, the people building this second temple were really discouraged. Some of the older folks who remembered Solomon's original temple were actually weeping because this new one just seemed so small and unimpressive in comparison. So you can just imagine the question on everyone's mind. How could this possibly be? How could this humble building, put together by a struggling community, ever have more glory than Solomon's golden masterpiece? It just didn't make any physical sense. And here is the absolutely stunning answer. Haggai wasn't talking about a building made of wood and stone at all. He was prophesying a radical shift. The greater glory wasn't going to be in a physical place. It would come to a completely different kind of temple, a spiritual one, built not with materials but with living stones. People from all over the world filled with the Spirit of God. So now, let's pull all these threads together, the forgotten booths, the ceremonies, Haggai's prophecy, and see how they all connect in this final, powerful revelation about what the temple was always meant to be. When you lay it out like this, the journey becomes so clear. It kicks off with Solomon and this physical building with an external, visible glory. Then it moves to Ezra, where the focus shifts inward, to the heart, through the rediscovery of the law. Then Jesus shows up and personally embodies the feast's deepest meanings. And all of it, every step, points to a future where the real temple is a spiritual body of believers. Even the famous outpouring of the Spirit at Pentecost wasn't the final destination. The Bible actually calls it a pledge, or like a down payment. It was a preview, a taste of the full inheritance, the ultimate fulfillment that this final feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, was always pointing toward. And here is that final vision. The book of Revelation paints this picture of a huge multitude of people from every single nation, a crowd so big you can't even count it, and they're all standing before the throne with, you guessed it, palm branches in their hands. That ancient ceremony from the temple courts finds its ultimate, mind-blowing fulfillment in this giant international gathering of living stones. And this brings us all the way back to where we started, that 900-year mistake, forgetting to build the boots. It wasn't just some historical accident. Its rediscovery forced a change in perspective. It shifted the focus away from a magnificent building and onto the written word. And that, in turn, unlocked the true prophetic meaning of the temple itself, paving the way for this whole new understanding. So, what's the big idea to take away from all of this? Well, the story of this feast really shows us a deliberate shift in focus, from a physical place to a spiritual people. It shows us that those ancient rituals were never just rituals for their own sake. They were signposts pointing to a deeper spiritual reality. And that the ultimate temple, the one with the greater glory, isn't made of stone and gold, but is a living community built with people from all over the world. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If the whole story of the temple has moved from a single location in Jerusalem to a global community of people, what does it actually mean for each of us to be a part of that structure, to be a living stone today? It's a pretty big question, and definitely one worth pondering. Thanks for joining us.